and nobody scores. If that is true, why would Shruti Sharma become All India rank 1 holder, right? With history optional. So do not fall prey to these myths, right? You choose your optional based on interest, put in all the efforts, you will get good score. If you really bring that content in the answers, right? There have been toppers of different subjects, and people look at absolute numbers. What are absolute numbers? How many students from a particular optional subject are there in the list? That is called absolute number. You should go for the ratio. What is ratio? How many opted for that subject and how many got selected? That is the right indicator. You know that people who opt for mathematics as an optional, that number is very less. So that ratio is also very good, in fact, even if you are selected. There are many who go for, say, political science, public administration, sociology, these days anthropology, geography, right? These are called popular subjects. And because these are popular subjects, many people opt for these subjects. And that's why number is impressive. So I would request you, though political science is one of the popular subjects, do not go by that. Prepare your mind for the requirements of this subject, right? And I would discuss what are the requirements. Tukaram Jadhav sir must have talked about that as regards paper 1. I would talk more about paper 2. Please understand what is called PSIR, right? This entire subject has got some subdisciplines. It has got some subdisciplines, right? What are subdisciplines of PSIR? One is what is called theory of state. Theory of state. Second, comparative politics. I would come to syllabus, don't worry. Comparative politics. Number 3, international relations. And there is one more, area studies. So broadly, these are the areas, but please understand, this is not there in our syllabus. It's practical kind of stuff. Area studies is not there in our syllabus. So we are concerned with these things. So theory of state, comparative politics, and international relations. These are 3 sub-disciplines based on which you see the syllabus of UPSC for PSIR as an optional subject, right? Then what is that? IGP and India and world. I would talk about that. Let us first understand this part. When you say theory of state, entire political science is all about state. It is all about power. It is all about state, right? Then why are we making this division? I would tell you why. Theory of state studies state as an object, its origin, right? How state is formed, different concepts, ideologies, theories, political thoughts about theory, about state, right? So that comes here in this first part. So concepts, ideologies, theories, right? Perspectives come here about state, right? That is one. The subject matter of second subdiscipline is it compares two political systems. It's not just about theory of state alone. It's about literally comparing two political systems, right? It's not theoretical as such. There is part of theoretical aspect here as well, but predominantly comparative politics is scientific, empirical, data-driven, right? And obviously there are 3 stages. The initial one was normative. I would discuss that later, right? So it's about comparison between two political systems. What are similarities? What are differences, right? And based on that, what we can learn, and can we go for a better kind of political system? That is subject matter of what is called comparative politics. Then there is third subdiscipline, international relations. It talks about the external behavior of states, right? And the kind of relation that develops between them. That is subject matter of what is called international relations. Is that clear now? Subject matter, right? So I would just erase this part. This is not there. So these are 3 subdisciplines as far as syllabus for UPSC is concerned. PSIR as an optional subject. Okay. You have thoroughly talked about this in the first lecture. It has got 2 parts. I would say theory And second, experiment. Try to understand what I'm trying to say. Experiment. Section A of both papers is theory. And then in section B, you go to the laboratory. Laboratory, pata hai na? You know it, right? You read science and then you go to what laboratory to test it, right? So your section A talks about theory of state, and the experiment is about Indian state with all its components, background, constitution, political bodies, systems, institutions, right? Everything comes here in section B, which is named as Indian government and politics. It covers both Indian government and politics. These are two different things. Government is an institution, ultimately, right? And politics is a process. Politics is process, right? Institution, process. Politics is also instrument through which certain things are done, right? So that is here in section B. And this is about theory of state, where you see what is political science, what is political theory, what is political ideology, different concepts like democracy, equality, liberty, etc., etc. Apart from that, different ideologies you learn: liberalism, socialism, Marxism, feminism, right? And there is Western political thought, something that you discussed yesterday. Western political thought, mostly Plato to Marx, but it goes beyond Marx as well, up to Hannah Arendt, right? Then there is what? Ancient Indian political thought, huh? And modern Indian political thought. Interestingly, there is no medieval Indian political thought in our syllabus, right? So ancient Indian political thought and modern Indian political thought, right from the Dharma Shastra tradition, right, Buddhist tradition, up to Gandhi, right? You can see that clearly. And then you have this section B, where Indian government and politics is the theme of section B, right? You have discussed that yesterday in detail, so I'm not going into that part. Let us focus on this part that is there in paper 2. ठीक है, ये आपने डिस्कस किया कल. You discussed this yesterday, so I'm just leaving it there itself, right? I gave you simple understanding of 3 sub-disciplines that we see in the syllabus of UPSC, PSIR, optional, right? Now let us look at these two, comparative politics and international relations. If I go by purely syllabus, not as, you see, you can look at PSIR as a subject. When you look at PSIR as subject in general, those were the areas: theory of state, comparative politics, international relations, and this thing, area studies, right? Let's focus on this part. Let's focus on this part, which is there in paper 2, right? Okay. So if you look at paper 2 from the perspective of UPSC examination, what are the components in paper 2? I would say there are 3 components. There are 3 components. One is comparative politics, other is IR, concept theory, and then India and world. These are 3 components in paper 2, right? So comparative politics, international relations, concepts, theories, right? And India and world. All right. We can again discuss what all things are there in these components, but that is how you look at paper 2, right? As I said, that theory of state in section A of paper 1, and then the experiment is Indian government and politics. Likewise, theory of IR to be applied in this section B. This is your laboratory. And UPSC has limited your scope as far as foreign policy is concerned by clearly saying that you are supposed to focus on India's foreign policy. Because the title is very clear, right? India and world. Similar thing in paper 1. So theory of state and then IGP. It does not expect you to study, say, for example, American government and politics, right? Chinese government and politics. It's very plain, simple fact that they are expecting you to focus on India. Likewise, here, you are supposed to focus on India's foreign policy. I would discuss about syllabus in detail, don't worry, right? So these are 3 components. Let us now talk about each component, right? Eventually, I would talk about something that you expect. What is that? Approach to study, right? I would also talk about sources. What books you are supposed to read, right? We would discuss that later. Let us focus on this part, comparative politics, right? I told you the syllabus, this is in section A. This is in section B. Section A and section B, right? So, what do we see in what is called comparative politics? Let us discuss that, right? I told you it's about comparing two political units, comparing two political systems, right? It is something like this. You compare UK and India. So both are what? Both are parliamentary democracies. But are they exactly same? No. So can we find some differences? For example, um, in UK, there is what is called their Westminster model, something that we have accepted here, right? So there is cabinet form of government. We also have cabinet form of government, right? But what are the differences? There is parliament, we have parliament here. There is upper house there, we have upper house here. There is lower house there, lower house here, right? Differences kya? What are the differences? There is something called shadow cabinet in England, right? We don't have it, right? And we have our own innovations in parliamentary function, like for example, 0 hour. So we can learn that shadow cabinet stuff and they can learn 0 hour from us, right? Something like that. So look at similarities, differences, and then try to learn. Obviously, theoretically speaking, the objective of comparative politics is larger than that. What is it? Hypothesis building and testing. What is hypothesis? Hypothesis is a thesis that is yet to be tested. That is yet to be tested, right? So comparative politics ka ultimate objective, the ultimate objective of comparative politics is to build hypothesis. Kya build karna? Hypothesis. Can we come up with better understanding of state and can we create a better state? So hypothesis building and then testing, right? That is the objective of comparative politics, right? Let us try to understand what all components are there in comparative politics. I told you there is theory of state, there is experiment. There is IR, there is experiment. What is there in comparative politics, right? Again, both theoretical part and actual comparison. Theoretical part and actual comparison, right? So the syllabus for comparative politics, right? First component is comparative politics, meaning, nature, right? And approaches. Meaning, nature, approaches. And there's one more component, comparative method. Do you have syllabus in front of you? Or otherwise you can open it. You must have syllabus copy, right? Okay. You keep that in front of you, right? So meaning, nature, approaches, and comparative method. But how it is written? Limitations of comparative method. Kya likha hai? Limitations of comparative method. Okay. What is the meaning of comparative politics? What is its nature, right? And what are approaches? There are two sets of approaches. I will talk about that. And limitations of comparative method. These are the topics mentioned by the syllabus, right? Interesting thing is nowhere syllabus mentions evolution. It is implicit, right? When you talk about nature of comparative politics, the nature has changed in 3-stage evolution of this subdiscipline. Comparative politics evolved through 3 stages. It evolved through 3 stages, right? And obviously, when you talk about evolution, the nature changes. When UPSC is telling you, you should understand nature of comparative politics, that also means you should understand nature of comparative politics in all 3 stages. We would discuss that. What are those 3 stages later on? They are roughly called old comparative politics, new comparative politics, and contemporary comparative politics. Getting this? Old, new, and contemporary. The nature has changed, right? So meaning, nature. Approaches. There are traditional approaches and there are modern approaches, right? Traditional and modern, which are mentioned in the syllabus, right? If you talk about traditional approaches, what do we see there? There are 4 of them. There is a philosophical approach, the oldest one. Philosophical approach, right? Historical approach, there is a legal approach, and there is institutional approach. Many people consider this as one approach. It's not like that. There are scholars who combine both. That's a different story. But these are two approaches, legal approach and institutional approach, philosophical, historical, right? As far as modern is concerned, right? There are again four, but two are explicitly mentioned by syllabus, right? So one is systems approach, डेविड ईस्टन का. दूसरा स्ट्रक्चरल फंक्शनलिज्म, पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी अप्रोच एंड पॉलिटिकल सोशियोलॉजी अप्रोच. ठीक. So that is syllabus, first line of comparative politics, right? Okay. So it includes all these things, and we will discuss all of them. Don't worry. We have very good notes. We have a lot of rich content, and we would discuss in detail. So systems approach, structural functionalism, political economy, and political sociology. So these are the approaches. Interestingly, now that mains test series is going on, right? Every year, we assess papers. TUKARAM sir, myself, and read its torture many a times, और हम फोन पे बात भी करते हैं, we talk to each other, क्या लिखते हैं बच्चे, है ना? आपको I'll tell you one folly. People write that political sociology studies interaction between state and society. Incorrect. Or elementary kind of understanding. Partially correct. Pay attention. See, interaction between state and society. So study of this part, right? Do you know this part is studied by two disciplines, not just one? There is something called political sociology that we study, and there is something called sociology of politics. Sociology of politics. What you are writing as meaning of political sociology is meaning of sociology of politics. लोगों को clarity नहीं इसके ऊपर. There is no clarity, right? What is political sociology then, and how it is different from sociology of politics? That falls into the subject called sociology of politics. They look at politics from the perspective of society, right? And here we look at society from the perspective of political science. And political science is study of power. It is study of power, right? Okay. So political sociology is study of interaction between state and society in terms of finding social basis of political power. That is the exact understanding of political sociology, right? What is it? Social basis, right? It is a study of interaction in order to study social basis of political power. Are you getting this? Then we have Karl Marx and Max Weber as pioneering kind of scholars as far as this approach is concerned. Likewise, political economy, right? What is it? Interaction of state and economy in terms of discovering economic basis of political power. Economic basis of political power, right? So these are four modern approaches. These are four traditional approaches based on syllabus and based on questions so far. Okay. Now, one important thing. See, I told you that comparative politics evolved in three stages: comparative government, comparative politics, या फिर old comparative politics, new comparative politics, contemporary comparative politics. Contemporary comparative politics. Please understand, this is where you see stage 1, right? And this is broadly stage 2. Then where is stage 3? It is here, and primarily here. So political economy approach stands in the transition zone. So modern as well as contemporary. And we will discuss that later. What is contemporary? What is being focused in contemporary comparative politics? Is that clear now? So meaning, nature, approaches, traditional, modern. So this is the content, right? Coming to that last topic in first line of syllabus, right? Last topic in first line of syllabus. That is limitations of comparative method. Limitations of comparative method. Let me tell you one thing very clearly, very, very clearly. Comparative method is a modern method. And many students, every year they write, Aristotle was first to use comparative method. I don't understand this. Kahan se leke aate ho? Where do you bring that from, right? Aristotle compared, right? Comparison has been done by many, but it was not done methodologically. Methodology involves some steps, right? Which are there in the modern comparative politics, right? So comparative method as a methodology, right, was developed in modern times. उसके stages क्या मैं बताता हूँ बाद में, right? But understand this, वो मत लिखो. Using comparison, everybody has done that. Everybody has done that, right? Okay. So Aristotle compared. He did not employ comparative method. And comparative method has got 3 stages, right? Definition of concepts, taxonomy, classification, and then hypothesis building and testing. He compared, that's it. And he came up with his own theory. Right? Aristotle's theory, right? But here, comparative method is a modern method. So you have to see, UPSC asks you to understand limitations of comparative method. But the point is, don't you think you need to understand comparative method first and then limitation? So syllabus has got some implicit kind of points, right? Which we need to understand. So 2 implicit points in the first line. One was evolution. The second was comparative method ka understanding. That is first line as far as comparative politics is concerned. After this first line of syllabus, the first line itself is theoretical part. Kya hai wo? Theory of CP, right? From second onwards, second, third, fourth, right? These are nothing but actual comparison. Nothing but actual comparison. Kya hai yahan pe? So they ask you to compare state. They ask you to compare state, right? Then they ask you to compare political participation and representation. Political participation and representation. And then they ask you to compare response to globalization. Response to globalization. समझ में आ रहा है आपको? That is syllabus of comparative politics. Now, compare what? Is it that we are supposed to compare state in India and those 200 more countries in the world? No, that becomes unlimited kind of syllabus, right? So UPSC has again put limitations on the syllabus, fortunately. They won't ask you random question, like compare political system of Ghana and India, right? They won't do it. What is the framework of comparison here? There are 2 frameworks of comparison. There are 2 frameworks of comparison. One is capitalist state versus socialist state, right? That is one. Second is developed, advanced countries versus developing countries, developing, underdeveloped, right? These are 2 frameworks. Question इसी के ऊपर आएंगे. Questions come on this, right? They won't ask you random question on a particular nation, right? And even if they ask, those will be well-known kind of countries. अभी तक तो नहीं आया. They have never asked question on a particular country, right? Okay, so this is what you see in the syllabus as far as comparative politics is concerned. Is that clear, right? So compare the state, compare political participation, representation, and compare response of global south and global north or developed countries and developing countries to globalization, right? Okay. Now, when you compare state, what do you compare? ये बहुत बड़ा topic है फिर से अपने आप में. You compare lots of things. You compare political system, not just state. State is part of political system, right? Please understand. And political system is larger kind of concept which includes everything. everything, participation, representation, right? Voting behavior, everything, right? State is state. State का जो structure होता है ना, executive, judiciary, legislature, right? Administration that comes in state. So structure is compared, functions are compared, political behavior is compared, different political concepts like what is political culture in India and some other countries. So all these things are compared here. That is called political system in totality, right? Okay. Political participation and representation. Representation कौन करता है रे? Who represents people? Political parties. They represent you in the system, in the state, right? Participation is also through political parties, right? What if you are not represented by the political party? You feel like I voted for a party, but they're not representing me. What are the other ways to participate and represent yourself? Interest groups, right? Pressure groups, and what is going on currently? Social movements. So this is what you compare when you are supposed to compare political participation and representation. Clear? Right? So when we study comparison of political representation participation in one country and other country, essentially we compare these things. Right? So that is third topic. Fourth is this, response to globalization. So how developed countries have responded to globalization, how developing countries have responded to globalization. But again, what is the implicit point? Implicit point is you respond based on impact. So you need to study impact of globalization on developed and developing countries, on capitalist and socialist states, and then the response, right? So that is syllabus of comparative politics, right? I would talk about approach later on to comparative politics, to international relations and everything, right? Okay. Now let us talk about what is there in international relations theory. International relations theory, right? In section A, you have got some points in international relations theory, and then section B is different. It is about foreign policy. So second component of PSIR paper 2, right, is IR theory. So what do we see in IR theory one by one, right? First, the first is approaches. And second is concepts. Ulta hona chahiye tha. Sequence should have been other way around, right? So approaches to IR, approaches to international relations, and then the next line comes concepts of IR, right? I would talk about both, right? In concepts of IR, you are supposed to understand concept of nation, nation state, national interest, power, national power, balance of power, deterrence, right? Detente, etc. There are others as well, transnational actors and different other concepts, right? So in concepts, we study these things, right? And please understand, these are to be studied in terms of how different scholars have contributed to the understanding of that concept. I would show you how we would study as a sample, right? Okay. So this is about concepts, right? In approaches, what UPSC has mentioned, kaun se approaches hai? What approaches do we see? One is idealism. Then the most dominant one, realism. Then Marxism, right? And there is systems approach. Systems approach. These are mentioned in the syllabus, right? Again, very, ek aur hai, functionalism. Functionalism, right? Okay. Very interesting. Implicit part. There are two here. One is idealism and second is functionalism. These two broadly come under what is called liberalism. There are three broad streams in liberalism as far as liberalism as theory of IR is concerned. Liberalism as theory of IR is concerned, right? One is in different ways it is talked about economic liberalism or interdependence liberalism, right? That is one, right? Second is Republican liberalism. Republican liberalism. Third is liberal institutionalism. Liberal institutionalism. Idealism is part of it. समझ में आ रहा है? Okay. And functionalism is sort of an extension of these things. Extension of liberalism. Functionalism is a modern development, quite recent kind of development. In 1940s, for the first time, he came up with that idea, David Metternich. And later on, in 70s, he came up with full theory of functionalism, right? To which Ernst Haas gave an improvement, right, over functionalism in the form of neo-functionalism. So we discussed both functionalism and neo-functionalism as far as approach to IR is concerned. Is that clear now? So there could be there have been questions on this. UPSC mentioned idealism and functionalism, and it would ask question on interdependence liberalism, right? We mentioned it, but you should understand, you should learn this entire approach of liberalism. So we would do all these things, don't worry, right? Okay. So that is about idealism. So that way speaking, liberalism is not a theory. It is theoretical tradition. What is the difference? Theory is like one theory, but there are different theories within the umbrella theory called liberalism. Usko bola jata hai theoretical tradition. It becomes a theoretical tradition. Likewise, these two are also theoretical traditions, realism and Marxism, right? So we will talk about that briefly. Next, realism, most dominant kind of theory which influences foreign policies like anything, right? Two theories have been very dominant as far as foreign policy of different countries are concerned. One is liberalism, other is realism. And there is constant debate, struggle between these two theories, right, in terms of their influence on international relations. As I said, liberalism is a theoretical tradition. Likewise, realism is a theoretical tradition. Huh? Okay. Another common mistake that students commit is about different strands of realism. Different strands of realism. Okay. Please understand, foreign policy is studied since ancient times. Foreign policy is studied since ancient times, right? And what is the origin of IR? International relations. ये जो term है ना, इसका origin कहाँ है? Right? Please understand, international relations is a modern field of study. But foreign policy and relation between different political units has been studied by people in ancient times as well. What is the difference? The difference is, when you say international relations, you are talking about relation between nations. And nation is a modern concept. Nation is modern concept, nation state rather. And that originates in the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648. So 1648 onwards, that is called modern IR, right? Modern IR. But IR, loosely, if it covers the relation between two kingdoms, two city-states, right, two empires, if we interpret that in that manner, you can also bring those ancient scholars as well. So if I consider IR as a loosely that discipline that covers whole gamut of things, relation between any kind of political units, that is where realism has got a different kind of categorization, right? What is it? Classical realism, neoclassical realism, right? Then strategic realism. Many people don't know strategic realism somehow, right? Then neo-realism. Are you getting this? So what is classical? What is neoclassical? here there is a difference. When students write some answers, I see some confusion here. What is the confusion? See, if we take that entire framework going back to the ancient times, right? There are three names which stand out. One is Thucydides from ancient Greece. Then everybody knows this name, Niccolo Machiavelli, right? And Thomas Hobbes. They what is called classical realism, right? And their thought was applied to modern IR by the Pope of IR, hence Morgenthau. Day one, you're bombarding us like anything. I'm just telling you what components are there and what we are going to study as part of our entire course. So don't worry, I will introduce all of them to you in such a manner you won't forget it. भूलोगे नहीं आप, भूलने नहीं देंगे, right? Don't worry about that. We will discuss all these things in detail and their theory simplify करके पढ़ेंगे, right? So thereby Morgenthau becomes neoclassical realist. What is neoclassical? Something that reinstates classical. जो classical को फिर से वापस लेके आए, that is called neoclassical in general, right? So he brought that classical thought in the modern times. So hence Morgenthau, right? Okay. Now confusion kya hai? Some students say in their writing that Morgenthau is a classical realist, whereas people, contemporary people like Farid Zakaria, right? They are neoclassical realist. This is also correct, but only in modern framework. Only in modern framework, right? So what is modern framework? From that Westphalia Treaty onwards, in fact 20th century rather, where IR became independent discipline. So in that sense he becomes classical, Morgenthau. Otherwise, if you take entire tradition, so if the question comes on classical or neoclassical, do not forget to include these three. If the question clearly says classicalism, write about them, and in the end write about Morgenthau. If the question comes on neoclassical, right, what you do is briefly talk about them. Talk about Morgenthau sizably, and talk about the contemporary realist scholars like Farid Zakaria. समझ में आ रहा है? So that should be your approach, right? So that is about classical, neoclassical. Then there is strategic realism by Thomas Schelling. We would discuss this. ये Cold War का context है, in the context of Cold War. And then there is neo-realism, right? And neo-realism again has got two subcomponents, right? Neo-realism is also called structural realism. क्या बोलते हैं उसको? Structural realism. इसके दो components हैं, defensive and offensive. Defensive structural realism, Kenneth Waltz. Offensive, John Mearsheimer. I'm telling you, do not get confused. Don't put yourself in that spot, right? क्या चल रहा है? What is going on, right? Don't do that. This is basic understanding of the syllabus. I'm just trying to break down syllabus to understand what all things we are supposed to cover, right? Okay. So that is about realism, right? Marxism. उसमें क्या पढ़ेंगे हम? What all things we would learn in Marxism, right? Again, Marxism or Marxist approach is a tradition of thought, right? So again, classical Marxism. वहां पे कौन आता है? Karl Marx. There is something called Leninism. So Leninist approach to IR, right? Then you have neo-Marxist, which is also called Gramscian approach. Represented by Robert Cox. And you have world system theory, Immanuel Wallerstein. I'm just jotting down all these things, right? Just to make you understand what all things are there in this part. So if you ask me, the heart of paper 2 as far as IR is concerned lies here. जो सबसे challenging part है understanding के लिए, it is this one. Once you master this, right, your paper 2 is done. You will get very good marks. Many students complain that they don't get good marks in paper 2. That is because they do not develop hold over this aspect. Number 1. Number 2, even if they have good understanding of this part, they fail to apply it in paper 2 section B. They fail to apply it in paper 2 section B. समझ में आया? ठीक है. So this has to be understood very carefully, right? So this is Marxist tradition, right? And as I said, as far as those two are concerned, functionalism and systems approach, right? Systems approach is there in comparative politics. Systems approach is there in theory of state. Systems approach is there in IR as well. All these traditions. So see, there is idealism in paper 1, idealism, liberalism. There is Marxism in paper, there is functionalism, systems approach in paper 1. Likewise, in paper 2, these approaches are there to CP as well as comparative politics as well as IR, right? Now, functionalism, as I said, it is kind of an extension of liberalism to the international level. And we studied two variants of it. So functionalism and neo-functionalism. So David Mitrany, ये बहुत interesting theory है, ठीक है? And Ernst Haas. These are two scholars that we learn. And systems approach, the last one. Here, the primary contributor is Kaplan, Robert Kaplan. And there is one professor called Harkvi who has compiled the research of different scholars in systems approach. So this is what you learn in, Robert Harkvi and Morton Kaplan. Robert Harkvi and Morton Kaplan, right? Okay. So this is what we study in what is called systems approach. Is that clear? Okay. So we covered 2 lines of syllabus. One, concepts, other, approaches, right? Let us go to the next component of syllabus. So this is 1, according to sequence in syllabus. 1, 2. Now 3 and 4 are very interesting. 3 and 4. Component 3 expects us to study, right? Changing international political system. Changing international political system. And 4th expects us to understand international economic system from Bretton Woods WTO. From Bretton Woods to WTO, right? What is this changing international political system? UPSC has clearly outlined 3 components under that, A, B, and C. Syllabus dekha hai na aapne? I'm explaining syllabus, but you should also have some kind of reading before you come here of syllabus, right? There are 3 components here, right? One tells us about what? The Cold War phenomena. Cold War phenomenon, right? Bipolarity. Cold War bipolarity, right? Then it talks about what? Non-alignment, right? And then it expects us to understand post-Cold War political system. समझ में आ रहा है? So Cold War bipolarity, उसको understand करो as a international system, right? Political system. Non-alignment का role in that system, right? And then post-Cold War world order system, right? So that's how you are supposed to understand how political system changed during Cold War period and then in post-Cold War period, right? Okay. As far as this component is concerned, again, there are these points, A, B, and C, right? What are these points? Point A talks about capitalist system, right? Bretton Woods system, right? Up to WTO. When the World War II was about to end, right, in 1945, before it ended, some institutions were born. One was what is called United Nations Organization, that was idealist experiment of idealism, right? and the other was of economic liberalism, right? Bretton Woods twins, कौन से हैं? Which are the Bretton Woods twins? World Bank and IMF, right? Okay. Along with that, there was an agreement called GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, right? So that system is called Bretton Woods system. Why it is called Bretton Woods system? Because Bretton Woods is a region in US where these Bretton Woods twins and agreement were arrived at, right? Later on, that GATT, right, which covered trade in goods, right? There was a need to cover trade in services. So they came up with another agreement, GATS, General Agreement on Trade in Services. Then one more topic came in, intellectual property rights. TRIPS came in. Then the world thought, we have created different instruments, right, to cover different things of trade. Why can't we have one single body, right, to take care of all trade-related aspects, whether it is goods or services or intellectual property, even disputes for that matter. So all these things were clubbed together and one organization was formed that is called WTO. We would discuss all these things in detail. What is WTO, how it works, and how these three have contributed to what is called international economic system, right? So World Bank takes care of financial aspect of the economic system. IMF takes care of the monetary aspect of economic system at the international level. And WTO takes care of trade aspect of the economic system. So finance, currency, and trade, right? So that is that capitalist kind of system from Bretton Woods to WTO, right? Well, this was going on during Cold War, and all of us know that Cold War was ideological, right? It was competition between capitalism and communism, socialism, right? While US was leading this part, USSR tried to have its own system, right? That is called CMEA. This is mentioned in the syllabus, CMEA, right? Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, right? CMEA. It could not develop to the level of sophistication that capitalist system developed, right? So still we can discuss what happened in CMEA in stages. What happened in 60s, 70s, and 80s, and how it declined eventually. The system that continues to this date is capitalist one. And this ended with the collapse of Soviet Union, right? Okay. And third component is about globalization. So globalization of world economy. Globalization of world economy. So that is how we are supposed to study what? International economic system. So component number 1, 2, 3, and 4 as far as what? IR theory is concerned, right? Component number 5. Again, very interesting one. Regionalization of world politics. सीक्वेंस थोड़ा बहुत इधर उधर होगा इसमें, एक यूएन का एक इसका है. Regionalization of world politics, right? And number 6 is about UNO. What is regionalization of world politics? We can go on discussing all these things later on, but after Second World War, world changed a lot, right? New institutions started coming up, new regimes, international organizations, regional organizations. The first attempt at a regionalization of world politics was done by Europe, and to be more precise, by Western Europe. Kisne kiya? Western Europe, right? Because Eastern Europe at that time was under influence of communism. Influence of communism. So what was happening in Western Europe? To check the westward march of Soviet communism, right? And to develop themselves after that destruction caused by World War II, reconstruction development, right? Western Europe, under the guidance of USA, thought about, integrating their economies. It all began with one sector, coal and steel. And they formed a commission called European Coal and Steel Commission, right? ECSC it is called. That cooperation in two sectors of economy boosted their confidence. This happened in somewhere in 1952. right? And with that confidence being built through one experiment, they decided to cooperate across all sectors of economy. I'm talking about cooperation across nation states. Huh? I'm not talking about cooperation within nation state, right? So cooperation, economy-wide cooperation. And then the next commission came EEC, European Economic Commission. And it became European Commission in 67. समझ में आ रहा है? And eventually it became European Union in 93. So that's how that regional integration began with that ECSC and culminated in the most sophisticated kind of regional integration in the world today, that is European Union. But that is not the only example. In 1968, you see formation of ASEAN, Association for Southeast Asian Nations, right? Then 85, formation of SARC. And number of other organizations came up, Organization for African countries, African Union, which became AU later on, African Union. Mercosur is about Latin America. Then NAFTA was there, which is now replaced by USMCA, US, Mexico, Canada, right? So regional organization. Then there's RCEP these days, right? So there are number of regional organizations operating in the world today. So that is another theme to understand theoretically, and obviously application in terms of EU and SARC and whatnot, right? So regionalization of world politics. Then UNO. What all things are we supposed to learn about UNO? Its formation, obviously, right? Its structure, mandate, right? And important agencies of UNO, its performance and reforms, if any. So it is covered under, and demand for reforms as well. And the last component is global concerns. क्या है? Global concerns, right? What global concerns are mentioned in the syllabus? The first one is democracy. Democracy as global concern. Please understand all these topics have got concrete theory. Merely teaching EU as regionalization of world politics or ASEAN or SARC, right, is not sufficient. What is regionalization? What are theories of regionalization? What theories brought about regional integration? Right? And these are not taught by many. And then your answer becomes generic answer because there is no theoretical insight in your answer when you're writing about EU. We will discuss all those theories later on, right? So regionalization of world politics. Likewise, in global concerns, when you talk about different global concerns, there is theory in understanding those global concerns, right? So democracy, then और क्या बताओ? Human rights, gender justice, right? Environment, terrorism, right? These are global concerns mentioned in the list in front of this topic. That is the last topic of what? Section A. समझ में आया? Okay. Just to give you some idea, if you take any one example, say environment as a global concern, do you know there are two important theories here: reformist ecologism and radical ecologism. So when you learn environment in political science, it's not merely about what is climate change, how destruction is happening, what efforts were done so far, what is that Stockholm Conference, first Earth Summit, Nairobi Summit, second Earth Summit, then Rio Summit, third Earth Summit, and thereafter COPs, which was an instrument created by UNFCCC that came out of what is called third Earth Summit, Rio Summit, right? UNFCCC operates through COP, Conference of Parties, and number of conferences of parties have taken place, the most important being Paris Conference of Parties, Paris deal, and thereafter whatever happened. The point is not that. That is to be learned. You learn that as part of GS as well, right? Then what is so different about political science? And same goes with all those concerns, democracy, human rights, gender justice, everything. You have to understand theories and how theories look at these problems, right? Okay, that is how political science is different from what is called general studies, GS, right? Okay. So second component, right? Third, that is your section B of paper 2, right? India and world. So paper 2, section B. क्या है वो? India and world. The first topic of syllabus is foreign policy of India. Foreign policy of India. उसमें क्या लिखा है? Determinants of India's foreign policy. Right? Institutions of policy making. Which institutions are involved in foreign policy making of India, right? And then continuity and change. Continuity and change in the foreign policy, right? Right from Nehru to Modi, isn't it? So that is first component. What is determinants? Those factors which determine foreign policy. So for example, our foreign policy towards Middle East is to befriend all of them. सभी से दोस्ती क्यों? Because we import almost 90% of our oil. We don't have oil reserves. Imagine if you would have oil reserves, तो हमारा रवैया क्या होता? What would have been our outlook towards Middle East? Quite different, right? So there are determinants. So need to import oil is determinant of India's foreign policy towards Middle East. समझ में आ रहा है आपको? So there are different determinants. Which are those? Historical, geographical, political, social, economic, right? Cultural. There are different determinants, right? When we go to ASEAN countries to have some kind of progress in the relation, we carry Buddhism in the pocket. So cultural dimension, I was just trying to explain that, right? Economic factors like India is a service-based economy that makes us a complementary economy to US. That becomes a determinant in India-US relations. So likewise, institutions, there are different institutions which play a key role in foreign policy formulation and implementation. There are many, I know that nodal agency is MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, but that is not it. There are multiple other institutions, Parliament, Parliamentary Standing Committees, right? PMO, Prime Minister's Office, right? And then NSC, National Security Council, and NSA, right? There are many institutions which contribute to foreign policy making. We will discuss that later, right? And then continuity and change. What is continuing and what is changing? एक example लेते हैं और आगे जाते, right? So for example, India is committed to disarmament. India was committed to disarmament. India is committed to disarmament, right? Right? Change क्या है? For example, India was non-nuclear country at that time. Now we are nuclear country, right? So, एक example उसका, right? We followed the policy of non-alignment at that time. Now we are talking about multi-alignment, right? Though non-alignment continues even now. Certain aspects of non-alignment continue, certain aspects have undergone some change, right? So continuity and change in the foreign policy, right? That is first topic. Second, it is about non-alignment specifically, right? You discuss NAM in first part. NAM as part of what? International political system, what changes it brought, right? But now you discuss India's principle of foreign policy called non-alignment, which was a precursor to NAM. NAM was a movement that took the form of organization, right? And this was the soul of NAM, the policy of non-alignment. And the chief architect was Jawaharlal Nehru. There were others who contributed later on. Even before India became independent, in June 1947, he called Asian Conference. He called Asian Conference as interim Prime Minister of India. And in that conference, when he addressed that conference, he said that India will not become satellite of any powerful country. India will not become satellite of any power. What does that mean? Satellite is controlled from a particular controlling station, right? So our foreign policy would not be dictated either by Washington or by Moscow. We would have our own mind while deciding our foreign policy. That is the crux of non-alignment. And another aspect is we won't join any military alliance. Yes, second aspect है क्यों? Because the moment you join military alliance, you have to abide by the alliance. And the leaders of alliance would dictate your policy, right? समझ में आ रहा है क्या आपको? That is how non-alignment emerged. But there are lots of things we are supposed to understand about non-alignment. What role it played during Cold War, did non-alignment become irrelevant in post-Cold War period? Is there any kind of relevance today, etc., etc., etc.? Right? We would talk about all those phases and how India looked at NAM as well. So non-alignment and India's policy towards NAM. Right? Number three, number four, right? They deal with global south. They deal with global south, right? So number three is about South Asia. That is our neighborhood. It deals with South Asia. That is our neighborhood, right? What all things are mentioned there? Again, A, B, C, right? It talks about South Asia as India's neighborhood and cooperation in South Asia in terms of SARC. In terms of SARC. Implicit क्या है? BIMSTEC. Because SARC failed, right? You cannot go and ask UPSC, you said SARC and you are asking question on BIMSTEC. UPSC would only smile at you, right? We said South Asia. It includes BIMSTEC as well. And even they can ask question on BBIN. What is BBIN, right? So SARC, why SARC failed? That is one. And then they have mentioned lookist policy. And they will ask question on actist policy. Because it is next avatar of lookist policy, right? So that is what you study in this component. But that also means you also study India's relationship with neighbors, which is not explicitly mentioned, but you have to study. And we will discuss those case studies. Don't worry. Most importantly, Pakistan. Right. So it deals with South Asia. Fourth line deals with other components of global South, Africa and Latin America, along with India's role in WTO. Because on the platform of WTO, India plays the role of leader of global South. समझ में आ रहा है? इसलिए उसको यहाँ पे रखा गया. Syllabus clearly mentions India's leadership role at WTO, right? And India's relation with Africa and Latin America. Please understand, we have almost no relation with Latin America except our interest in football. Right? India के बारे में ये बोला जाता है, and since long time, since more than 2 decades now, right? It is said that Latin America is last frontier of India's foreign policy. We are yet to reach there. In the manner in which it is expected. It's not that we don't have relation with Latin American countries. We don't have a diplomatic presence there, but it's very meager. It's very meager. And there is huge limitation as far as India's foreign policy towards Latin America is concerned. We will discuss that, right? But Africa के साथ काफी हद तक हमारे relation अच्छे बने हुए, particularly since 2000, right? So Africa, Latin America and WTO, right? Number 4. Number 5. India and global powers. India and global powers. इसमें किसका किसका mention किया है? Which powers are mentioned? US, obviously, right? China, then Russia, then Japan. Wait for a moment. So Russia, China, Japan. We cover South Asia here. Have we now almost covered rest of Asia? Yes, except West Asia, that is Middle East, which is covered in the last point of syllabus. So that's how Asia is covered in different points. Here, Africa and Latin America is covered. And then you have global power that covers US. And global power mein aur bhi aa sakta hai. It's like etc. Getting this, right? Okay, so another mention is of EU, European Union, ASEAN. इनके साथ भी relations आपको पढ़ने पड़ेंगे. So India and global powers in short. Number 6, it's about India's nuclear policy. Explicitly mentioned, right? When did we adopt nuclear policy? (1998) No, right from the beginning. India's nuclear policy was shaped by Jawaharlal Nehru and Homi Bhabha. Those are called formative years of India's nuclear policy. And those are also called Nehru Bhabha years. क्या बोला था उसको? Nehru Bhabha years. वहां से लेकर फिर 74, 98, and the current nuclear policy of India was formulated by the Vajpayee government, right? In 2000, which also has components from Nehru Baba years as well, right? So that evolution we are supposed to understand. Nuclear policy का evolution, right, from beginning up to present times, right? So nuclear policy. Then और वहाँ पे क्या बोला है पता है क्या? Actual syllabus line क्या है? What is the syllabus line? Changing nuclear policy के बारे में पूछा है. Changing nuclear policy, changing perceptions about nuclear policy, right? Then the last component is about uh, it's about crisis conflicts in West Asia, right? Middle East जिसको बोलते हैं, and other crisis, and what is India's foreign policy towards them. So for example, Israel Palestine, right? Then Afghanistan का जो war खत्म हुआ यहाँ पे, Iraq का crisis, and right now Iran crisis. The last topic is never ending. You have to go on adding the contemporary developments, and this entire section B has got strong current component. It has got strong, very strong current component, current affairs. So everything that is happening in IR, global politics, you have to keep an eye on that. Is that clear? That is the syllabus that we have, right? There is one component in the end, which is part of this one only, India's vision for New World Order. India's vision for New World Order, right? Syllabus of section B ends with this prospective kind of thing, right? What kind of world order India wants, right? Uski kai sare characteristics hai. We would discuss that component also in detail, right? When we take up that topic, right? So that is syllabus as far as section B is concerned, right? Okay. Now let's come to this part. Approach to the study of paper 2 and sources. This was introduction to the syllabus, huh? It's not that I have taught all of it. मैंने बस आपको syllabus बोला है, right? Don't get baffled, don't get frightened, right? I'll tell you one thing. This subject is very interesting. Immensely interesting, right? The moment you start understanding. In our times, we had to opt for 2 optionals. And my 2 optionals were political science and history. If somebody asked me to choose only one, I would choose PSIR, right? It's immensely interesting, right? The moment you start understanding this thing, here is, on one hand, it is interesting. On other hand, it is empowering. It is very much empowering, right? Okay. By the way, I forgot something which is very interesting. Frankfurt School. We would learn that as well as part of Marxist tradition, right? Anyways, approach to study. Okay, let me talk in general first about this. In general, right? So we have PSIR paper 1, section A, PSIR paper 1, section B, PSIR paper 2, section A and section B, right? I would say the crux of PSIR lies here. Irrespective of paper 1 and paper 2, right? The crux lies here. Section A. How good is your section A decides how good you are in political science. It is that important, right? You should learn section A in such a manner, right? आधी रात को भी उठाऊंगा ना तो आपको आना चाहिए. Develop that, right? Rest, everything will fall in place. The most crucial part is this. Everything else is application or extension of it. Everything else is application or extension of it. So we are learning here Marxist approach, right? That is extension of what you learn in paper 1, section A, right? So please understand, this is crucial. और थोड़ा सा मैं narrow कर रहा हूं उसको. Yes, all thinkers are important, but if you could understand 2, you're almost there. Plato and Aristotle. ये प्लेटो तो ना बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग नमूना है, पता है क्या आपको? UPSC used to ask that question. They have stopped asking it now, but they can fall back on that question once again, right? That entire Western political thought is either Platovian or non-Platovian. That is the kind of cardinal significance that person enjoys in the Western political thought. समझ में आ रहा है आपको? हाँ, कभी-कभी कोई चीजें भूल जाता हूं मैं sometimes, you know. I talked about Thucydides, उसी के टाइम में था, प्लेटो के टाइम में, right? Machiavelli and Hobbes, implemented by Morgenthau, right? When I ask question on realism, people bring Kautilya, and some go to China, they bring Sun Tzu. Please understand, I understand that these were ancient realistic thinkers from India and China, but they have no explicit relation with this tradition. Mix up मत करो, right? ये tradition continuous है, इनका break हुआ है, right? So for example, if you talk about Kautilya, right? The point is, we got to know about Kautilya in 1904. हम खुद ही भूल गए थे. The manuscript of Arthashastra was discovered in 1904, then translated. Then we got to know about Kautilya, right? So ये अलग tradition है, Western. And Western tradition, unfortunately, dominates IR theory. Don't mix up unless there is some kind of explicit reference to either of these two, Sun Tzu or Kautilya, right? Okay, so I was saying that section A is very important, Plato is very important, right? You would find traces of other thinkers in Plato, right? And his biggest critic was Aristotle, his own disciple. So if you understand these two, a lot is in your control now, as far as PSIR is concerned. Obviously, there are others who are equally important, and one person who would bother you is Marx, right? Hegel and Marx, who are exactly antithetical to each other, though Hegel influenced Marx, right? So prepare this very well. Section A of PSIR, and then you can apply those things to section B as well as to paper 2. So that is basic approach. So prepare this thoroughly, section A, and try to apply to section B. Likewise, here, prepare this thoroughly, that is section A, apply that to section B. But there are two components, right? Comparative politics, IR theory. इसका इसी में है application. The theory of comparative politics has to be applied within that section, right? But the next part, that is IR theory, इसको यहाँ apply करना चाहिए आपने. You should apply it here, right? So, for example, let us take any recent example, right? We signed recently FTA with EU, with New Zealand. जानते हो क्या? हाँ, एक सेपा साइन किया हमने कनाडा के साथ, right? So when you look at these developments, GS में लिखोगे what is there, क्या provisions and all that. But a political science student would say that the neoliberal content in foreign policy is increasing. Neoliberal content in foreign policy of India is increasing. समझ में आ रहा है आपको? और ये भी ऐड करेगा उसमें. Right now, the world is increasingly looking like what Joseph Nye and Robert Kuhn called complex interdependence. Complex interdependence. ये सब क्या है बाद में पढ़ाऊंगा, don't worry. But the point is, you have to apply theory, and that should be your approach. If you write about FTA with EU as what are the provisions, what are gains of India, what are challenges, and conclusion, this is GS answer, you won't get marks. Right? Along with that, what do you bring from theory? How is your GS answer different from theory? Sorry, from PSIR? ये बड़ा important है. So if your PSIR answer is rich with theoretical insights, that is very good get good marks in paper 2 section B. Otherwise, your marks are quite limited, right? So that should be your approach. I would talk in detail, right? कुछ points मैंने jot down किए हैं, right? I used to have a PPT, right? Today I thought I'll go differently. Students judge us on day 1. PPT लेके आए, मतलब देख के पढ़ाएंगे. अरे नहीं, वैसे ही पढ़ा सकता हूँ. It's not like that, right? Please understand. Only thing is, you should not carry ego. That is my personal opinion. What is ego? I'll go, I'll stand and deliver. But there could be some points you missed out, right? जैसे कि मैंने अभी फ्रैंकफर्ट स्कूल I missed out. अगर लिख के लाता तो मिस आउट नहीं होता, आपका नुकसान नहीं होता. Even the best of the best professors across the world They carry something with them when they come for the lecture. जानते हो क्या? Either a piece of paper or presentation. People have a wrong criteria to judge teachers. You don't focus on the discussion, you focus on the aids. Teaching is not about aids. Teaching is different skill, right? And aids are different. Aids are very important, right? Anyways, so introductory lecture. All those things I discussed are there in the PPT. You can see that. कुछ नहीं है उसमें लिखा है कि understand concepts carefully, either of comparative politics or of IR, right? And please understand that comparative politics is static kind of syllabus mostly. There is hardly 2-3% of current dimension, not more than that. So comparative politics एक ऐसा topic है ना where you can earn marks like anything, but people ignore that somehow, right? You should not ignore that part. So let me see approach. So this is syllabus. Yeah. So understand the subdiscipline. When I began discussion, I drew those boxes, right? दो boxes बनाए थे मैंने. What is theory of state? It studies state, right? What is comparative politics? It compares two political systems. So get the crux of it. Understand meaning nature first. And then mostly static hai, application to certain current developments. For example, I have prepared a crash course this year for mains going students, which can be useful to you as well going forward. Abhi nahi, right? Pehle basic part, right? And in that crash course, I have only covered the new areas, latest areas of research, right? So for example, there is new area which has been now discussed heavily in comparative politics. That is digital authoritarianism. Digital authoritarianism, right? Then how AI has impacted comparative politics, right? Impact of latest technologies on methodologies of comparative politics. Are you getting this, right? So all these are new areas. That is a what 1% component, but otherwise it's very much static kind of syllabus. So understand the subdiscipline and mostly static hai. So if you study properly the content that is given to you, you can really score very good marks in this section, right? IR theory, thorough understanding of concepts and theory is the key, right? Thorough understanding, उसमें confusion नहीं होना चाहिए, बिल्कुल. The moment I suddenly say, can you explain strategic realism of Thomas Schelling? आपने शुरू होना चाहिए. It should be that kind of understanding. The best part of why, okay, I talked about my personal choice, right? There is a reason behind that, right? Subjects like history, right? You have a struggle of revision. For me, political science was like wonderful because once I understand, I can write. There are few things which need revision, no doubt about that in political science as well. But the moment I understand theory, that is with me throughout life. So how to understand it, we will do that in the classroom. Don't worry, right? But once you develop that mastery over concepts and theory, that is the key to get good marks in paper 2. And it's not just about applying theory. You can apply concepts in your section B answers. So for example, if the question comes on, say, Galwan clash or Doklam standoff, you can write something like this. This indicates intense phase of bilateral Cold War between India and China. And after that phase, what began between these two countries was a phase of détente. So I used two concepts from section A to describe what a GS student would have plainly described. So you use concepts, theories consciously in section B, and that is your approach, right? So learn to apply concepts and theory to section B, right? India and world, understand each topic thoroughly with its current affairs dimension. So for example, you are learning what? Determinants of foreign policy, right? Something that is not conventional is technology now. right? So how technology determining foreign policy of different countries, right? So for example, what 5G communication, big data, AI. So I always apply that current dimension to your study. For example, policy of non-alignment. You would discuss, you would learn from the books up to say 2010, 2015, not more than that. But how non-alignment policy changing currently, you learn that from paper, newspaper, articles, and articles of different scholars, right? So always maintain that current dimension to every topic that you learn. SARC, why is SARC dysfunctional right now? What happened after Pulwama and Uri? Why was Islamabad conference cancelled? And thereafter no conference was held as far as SARC is concerned. This is not mentioned in the syllabus. Always continuously add that current affairs dimension, right? Application of concept theory from section A has to be done here. Otherwise, your answer is plain GS answer. So, GS answer plus application of concepts theories is equal to PSIR answer. That's how you should understand it, right? So, this is the approach. Book list for section A. What books you are supposed to read? I would later on talk about two things. One, sample PYQs, any year for that matter. And I would also talk about how to use these books. पहले तो list देख लो, ठीक है? There are two sections here, three sections: primary reading, standard reference books, and additional reading, if any, right? Primary reading for section A is contemporary world politics. That is class 12 NCERT textbook. That is directly linked to our subject called international relations or world politics, right? Reference books. ये basic है, बहुत basic है, very basic kind of thing. For comparative politics, there is a book called New Comparative Government by J.C. Zohri. J.C. Zohri, right? There is one more book by J.C. Zohri that is called New Comparative Politics. There are two books by Zohri. One is New Comparative Government, then there is New Comparative Politics. Both are useful, but initial 10 chapters of this book should be sufficient for you. And that book, New Comparative Politics by Zohri, is quite heavy one, right? You are not supposed to go into that way in a very detailed manner. कौन सा बुक पढ़ना है? वैसे कोई बुक नहीं पढ़ना है. ये रखो आपके पास. Whenever you feel like notes में वो नहीं आया, then you can refer to those books. We have taken content from these books. We have taken content from these books. I have one more thing that I would like to convey to everyone, that I see sometimes students say, सर ने ना इस बुक से कंटेंट लिया, तो मेरा खुद का कहाँ बनाऊंगा मैं? अगर मैं खुद का बनाता तो मैं स्कॉलर होता, राइट? पॉलिटिकल साइंस का. क्या बातें कर रहे हो आप? हाँ, डोंट यू थिंक यू आर एक्सपेक्टिंग टू मच फ्रॉम योर टीचर? टीचर इज अ मीडिया दैट ब्रिंग्स यू समथिंग फ्रॉम बुक्स, राइट? अगर खुद का इन्वेंट करता तो यहाँ पे क्यों रहता? मैं ऑक्सफोर्ड में चला जाता, राइट? एज अ स्कॉलर, रिसर्चर इन सम थिंक टैंक. पीछे कोई डॉक्टरेट लगा करके क्या बात कर रहे हो आप, राइट? I have to bring content from different books. Only thing is, when I do it, right, I will do it bringing content from a lot of books. Because I have only one target in front of me, PSIR. आपके सामने क्या है? GS paper 1, GS paper 2, 3, 4. तो ये हमारा काम है. So we bring that content. So the moment you open our booklets and you look at this book, you would see that यहाँ से content हमने लिया है, right? And we have enriched that from that book, New Comparative Politics by J.C. Zohri. So you should rely on the study material. As far as new developments, right, enrichment is concerned, we have published volume 3, Political Science in Question and Answer format, volume 3. That is the enrichment, right, for both section A and section B. And crash courses like the one I'm conducting right now. उसमें टॉपिक्स क्या क्या है पता है क्या आपको? डिजिटल अथॉरिटेरिज्म, राइट? AI and comparative politics, AI and international relations theory, right? Then techno geopolitics क्या है? India's foreign policy and all these things. India's foreign policy on critical mineral diplomacy, right? ये सारे नए टॉपिक्स ऐड होते रहते हैं. We do that periodically, so don't worry about that as well. But this is the basic thing you are supposed to do. Then for IR, international relations by Vinay Kumar Malhotra. Many students even don't know this book, right? सो वीके मल्होत्रा, ये बुक हम क्यों रिकमेंड करते हैं? फॉर बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट्स ऑफ आईआर, national interest, power, national power, balance of power, Cold War, detente, deterrence, all these basic concepts which are mentioned in the syllabus, there are separate chapters on them in this book, and there is lot of theoretical content there. It's not plain and simple kind of stuff. There's lot of theoretical content. मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ इससे मैंने क्या लिया है in my PPT as far as basic. Let me do that right away. I would reopen this, don't worry. ठीक है? But I want to show you. Yes, here itself. Okay. Comparative politics. नहीं, क्या देखना था हमको? IR basic concepts. हाँ, we can open any one. So national interest जो पहला है सिलेबस में, राइट? उसको प्लेन सिंपल तरीके से नहीं पढ़ना है, उसको कैसे पढ़ना है एज फार एज PSIR इज कंसर्न, राइट? सो दिस इज इंट्रोडक्शन, बेसिक इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ नेशनल इंटरेस्ट. क्या दिख रहा है आपको यहाँ पे? व्हाट जोसेफ फ्रैंकल हैज टू से अबाउट नेशनल इंटरेस्ट, राइट? सो इस तरह से वो कंटेंट आपको देखने को मिले, राइट? सो फ्रैंकल, हाउ ही लुक्स एट ऑब्जेक्टिव एंड सब्जेक्टिव अप्रोचेस टू national interest, right? And then values and aims as national interest. What different scholars have to say. Frankel, Charles Lurch, Abdul Saeed. ये said नहीं है, Saeed है, right? Vernon van Dijk. So all these scholars, their views. आपके आंसर में, if there's a question on national interest and these scholars are not seen, you won't get good marks, right? So do not go for very basic content. Go for a rich content, right? So that is how we bring that content from those books. And that's why I'm saying you can rely on this. You can rely on this, right? You can read those books, no doubt about that. But at the same time, I would say that the entire syllabus is quite large, and I would request to use those books as reference books. And reference books are those where you refer to them. You don't read them end to end, right? Okay, coming back to sources. So, international relations by VK Malhotra, right? Okay. Global politics by Andrew Haywood covers a lot of things for you. Different theories, concept cover नहीं करता Haywood. Haywood assumes that you know concepts. Haywood covers theories. Haywood covers a history of international politics in first chapters, right? Haywood covers that point, changing international political system. Haywood covers international economic system, but being a Western person, they have their own complexes, superiority complexes. He would not discuss non-alignment. And this fellow, while I was reading this book for the first time, I was very angry with this person. Andrew Haywood, typical Western biased kind of person, right? But I'm telling you, I haven't seen a more wonderful book than his. How you can organize book in finest manner, that is Andrew Haywood. You are reading his content on a page, then you stumble upon a concept, you don't understand it. थोड़ा search करो, side में दिया है उसने short में. You come across a particular thing, he writes page number, you can shift to that page. It's like hyperlink while reading your book. ये पता नहीं है, वो बोलता है bracket में, यहाँ जा, go to this page. It's wonderfully organized book. Content is excellent. Only objection I had was the Western bias, which is apparent in many places, right? है ना? मेरा जो book है ना, उसमें लिखा भी है मैंने इसमें, how biased are you? और भी कुछ लिखा है, बोल नहीं सकता जब गुस्सा आया था. But very good book, right? Some students are like this, sir. और बताओ ना बेटा, और बताने के लिए बहुत बड़ा, मतलब I'll tell you, okay, jokingly I'll tell you, but it was serious kind of stuff. Tukaram sir once gave me some 29 books on IR and foreign policy. उनका लाइब्रेरी तो बहुत बड़ा है, छोड़ो उसको. He visits International Book Festival which happens in Delhi every year. ठीक, तो ये मत पूछो और क्या पढ़ूं, एंडलेस लिस्ट है. डोंट डू दैट. दिस इज इनफ. दिस इज इनफ. और जो कम पड़ेगा हम देंगे इन टर्म्स ऑफ स्टडी मटेरियल, क्लास स्टडी मटेरियल. अगर एडिशनल चाहिए तो कंपैरेटिव पॉलिटिक्स बाय जेसी जोहरी, आई टॉक्ड अबाउट इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स कॉन्सेप्ट्स, थियरीज, इश्यूज बाय room ki basu, right? Or below, does elephant dance for section B and all that. You can go on reading these things, right? Don't read thorough. Why? He's a political leader now, and those biases come in. You should read independent scholars. Okay? Don't read books of Tharoor, neither of Jaishankar. नहीं तो लिख के आओगे एग्जाम में that क्या Hanuman is a very good diplomat. That is what Jaishankar said that, right? So be careful. Okay. Section B के लिए book list क्या है? What is the book list for section B? See, India's foreign policy, retrospect and prospect by Sumit Ganguly, I would say compulsory for you. At any cost, right? You avoid this book at your own risk. Right? Whatever I'm discussing here, how to apply theory in section B, how to apply theory in section B, this fellow is the editor. He edited by hand, edited by. There are many scholars who have contributed different chapters in this book, and they have applied theory, right? I know this book is old one, which covers foreign policy of India. That question is how to apply theory. ये आपको बताएगा. Number one. Number two, what is happening between India and Pakistan today cannot be understood without understanding the historical relationship. So that is done by this book. I know there are selected case studies and important case studies, but that would be huge kind of groundwork for anybody who wants to study India's foreign policy with theoretical depth, which is required in PSIR, right? So retrospect and prospect by Sumit Ganguly, right? और बताओ ना sir. The Oxford Handbook of Indian Foreign Policy, edited by C. Rajamohan, David Mellon, and there is one more person, right? Again, ये बहुत बड़ा book है, इतना बड़ा book. It's a huge book, right? But very good book when you want to understand few things like institutions of foreign policy making, determinants, right? And different other things like India's energy policy for that matter, right? And different parts of the world with which India has got foreign policy, right? But don't worry, we cover all those things, right? Additional reading. By the way, एक सवाल यहाँ से directly आया था in UPSC examination. Discuss drivers of India's growing relation with African continent. तो इसमें था वो 6 drivers of India's foreign policy towards Africa. Does Elephant Dance by David Mellon. This could be another additional reading. Articles from Indian Express and The Hindu. It's not that I have mistaken in sequence. That is the sequence. Right? पहले Express, बाद में Hindu. Why? The kind of coverage Express gives you about IR, utna Hindu is also very good paper. No doubt about that, right? Articles are wonderful, right? And generally, I say it like this. I know it's exaggeration a bit. थोड़ा exaggeration है, मैं जानता हूँ, right? But it's very important to understand, right? Generally, I write it like this. IE is equal to IR. Indian Express is equal to international relations. If someone gives me that confidence, sir, last 1.5 years, I haven't missed a single article on IR from Indian Express. Your GS paper to IR and PSI section B is done. It's almost done, right? Why I'm saying with this kind of confidence? Because in section B, आपके options हैं. तो आपको क्या एक या दो सवाल लिखने हैं, apart from that compulsory question number 5. That is taken care of, right? And thereafter, if you want to be extra secure, if something else comes which is not covered by Indian Express, you have the Hind. So read both, right? Collect articles from both. Somebody may say this becomes burdensome. No. On any particular day, जो न्यूज़पेपर होता है ना, उसके 2 pages, पता है आपको? ऐसे इधर होता है editorial and there are opinion columns here, right? And even editorial भी कभी-कभी 1, 2, 3 articles आते हैं. So roughly you have some 7 to 8 articles every day, right? But please understand there are some articles which are not linked to a syllabus. An article may come on editorial page, op-ed page, on how Spain won the football final. क्या लेना देना है? What is your relation, right? How great Messi is. आते हैं कभी कभी इस तरह के आर्टिकल्स, नॉट नीडेड, राइट? What should Rahul Gandhi do now? Right? Not needed. You focus on policy matters, right? You focus on those things which syllabus is connected, right? And thereby you can reduce certain articles, and that makes space to add articles from the other paper to your reading list. Virtually you're reading one paper only, but wisely you can pick articles selectively, and that's how you can cover both Express and Hindu, right? Then website of MEA, whenever applicable, when you want to know the government's point of view, you can go here. And some websites like diplomat.com, orfonline.org, these are think tanks. These are foreign policy think tanks. But there's a caveat. What is caveat? Warning, caution. These are oceans. Samundra mein doob jaoge. There are so many articles covering so many aspects, right? You get baffled. So how these are to be used, I'll tell you. If you're not getting any article in Indian Express and Hindu, right? So do one thing. For example, Indian Express Hindu did not cover, say, India, New Zealand FTA. You got the article on India, EU FTA in Hindu or Express, but ye nahi mila. So what you do is, Google pe jao, go to the Google, India, New Zealand FTA, ORF online. You'll find an article. Nahi mila, India, New Zealand FTA, diplomat.com. You'll get the articles. समझ में आ रहा है? That's how these are to be used selectively, not fully. Whenever you're not getting any content, these oceans can provide you content. All right. So these are sources that you're supposed to use as far as preparation for paper 2 is concerned, right? All right. Yes. So we talked about different aspects of paper 2. We talked about syllabus. We talked about approach. We talked about sources, right? Okay. Let me check if I can bring some PYQs. I must have that here in my pen drive or maybe on my, हाँ इसी में शायद देखा किसी ईयर का मैंने डाला होगा. देयर मस्ट बी 23 या 24 का पेपर यहाँ पे होगा. No, this is no. PDF ओपन किया मैंने, एक सेकंड ना. हैव टू गो टू यस. हाँ यहाँ पे प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चन पेपर एनालिसिस है. ओके. ऑलराइट. हाँ रफली ये पैटर्न बदलता रहता है. आई डोंट बिलीव इन सच काइंड ऑफ नंबर्स एज सच, बट रफली 3-4 क्वेश्चंस कम ऑन comparative politics and 10 to 11 questions on international relations concepts and theory. India and world, 14 questions. There is no particular pattern as far as section B is concerned. It's completely up to UPSC, right? Okay, what we can do is on YouTube channel of Unique Academy, right? I have explained entire paper 2 of 2025. राइट? तो वो आप देख लो, वहां पे डिटेल उसका एनालिसिस है, राइट? है ना? एंड वो कैसा है, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ वीडियो इट इज? इन द फर्स्ट हाफ इट इज तुकाराम सर हु इज एक्सप्लेनिंग व्हाट पेपर 1, इन द सेकंड हाफ पेपर 2, राइट? आपके कुछ सवाल है तो पूछो मुझे. लेट्स कीप फॉर द लास्ट 10 minutes फॉर योर क्वेश्चंस. एनी क्वेश्चंस रिगार्डिंग एनीथिंग एज फार एज पेपर 2 इज कंसर्न? सेक्शन बी व्हाट? नोट्स ऑफ सेक्शन बी मिलेंगे ना? You will get it. But section B के notes useful होंगे ऐसा कोई guarantee नहीं है. You would appear in 2027, right, or 2028. How can I predict what will happen in international politics? It's a continuous kind of stuff. You have to build on current affairs, right? I would give you basic note, no doubt about that. Those who are online, they can also ask questions, huh? Right? On the Zoom platform, not YouTube as such. Yes. Any more questions? Mm-hmm. I asked you one question informally in the beginning, right? And the question was, why did you choose PSIR optional? Many students say that it is because of the overlap with GS paper, right? It is very deceiving. Okay. And I'll tell you why it happens so. Okay. Any optional subject, right? When you study it honestly, right? You get knowledge. And knowledge empowers you. Knowledge empowers you. An empowered person cannot remain silent. Right? And political science as an optional is a subject of power itself. Then you feel all the more empowered. You feel all the more empowered. And unfortunately, right, GS papers come first in the examination. And the kind of empowerment you're carrying, you're like, I want to write everything. And students commit that mistake. They start writing content that they learned in political science in paper 2. What UPSC does behind the curtain, nobody knows. But many people say that there is rationalization. What is rationalization? They understand that political science students have extra advantage in paper 2. If they see the content coming from political science, core content, they would cut your marks. That is what is probable kind of assessment that we have. So simple solution is write in simple language in paper 2. Keep that entire paraphernalia, all those weapons for optional only. Do not write in the manner you write in optional as far as GS is concerned. And that goes for every optional. You should not, if your optional is history and geography and sociology, so paper 1. Ye dekha, I have seen this as well. You know this? Those who have these 3 options, they score less in paper 1. So that is usual pattern because students, knowingly or unknowingly, they bring that content from optional. You should not do that. Write in a simple manner as far as GS is concerned. Jo bhi dikhana idhar in optional. Any more questions? Timing in the sense? It should be prioritized first in order to. I told you, right? In approach, I made very clear that the foremost thing is to study and develop control, hold over section A. And I also talked in a micro manner. Understand Plato or Aristotle first. ऐसा नहीं कि सीधा jump करोगे. Understand concepts first, ideologies, and then go to Western political thought. But how good you are in political science is decided by how good you are in section A. So that is the most important part of political science syllabus, right? Anything else? Let me conclude the session as far as online is concerned, right? Okay. Are we done with the questions? Civil administration is? No theories are applicable in the work, right? At the most, your understanding, becomes quite good, right? The subject which is directly linked to your work is public administration, right? And obviously, there is some overlap between political science and public administration, right? So these, optional क्यों है UPSC में? If you are given a particular subject, can you study it in an in-depth manner to test that? That's it, right? So every subject helps from GS in your work, right? And वो specialized job नहीं है UPSC का job, IAS, IPS. These are jobs of generalist. As an IAS officer, what would you be doing apart from revenue work? For example, आपके डिस्ट्रिक्ट में स्वच्छ भारत अभियान कैसे इंप्लीमेंट हुआ? How many toilets were constructed? Right? How many are functional? What are the problems in other toilets? इसमें कौन सा theory apply करोगे? Plato, Aristotle, Karl Marx, right? Understand, work is different. It's practical kind of work. Government schemes, government rules, regulations, law and order, revenue. That is what you would handle, and not what you learn in different optional subjects. Even in case of public administration, right? It's the actual practical work. उधर आप वहां की scholars लेके नहीं आते. Though it will help you understand public administration effectively, right? But anyway, that is being taught as part of your training. मैं फिर वही बता रहा हूं आपको. You would understand Indian political system in which you would work. समझ में आ रहा है आपको? Right? And you would have a lot of theoretical insights into it. That is there, but practical work is different. Practical work that I'm talking about as an IAS officer, IPS officer, right? अगर apply करना ही है तो there are ways in which it can be seen. For example, you are posted as an IAS IPS officer on Jantar Mantar currently. वो सब याद आता है. What are social movements? What are new social movements? What are the methods employed by social movements? Right? So all these things you can understand that movement and act accordingly. Right? And by the way, do not think about all these things right now. You think about passing the examination. Right? Masuri will take care of your training. What is useful while working, government will take care, DOPT will take care of it. Right now, we have to take care of syllabus and the examination. Focus on that, right? Any more questions? All right, then I'm ending question answer session. I think online